Welcome to the Growth Whisperers, where everything we talk about is building enduring great companies. My name is Brad Giles, and today, as always, joined by my co-host, Kevin Lawrence in Vancouver, BC. Hello, Kevin. How are things today?
Things are good, Brad.
Good to hear.
I'm really looking forward to this episode. It's something that I've been having a lot of conversations over the years, but in particular the last year with a bunch of people about this. So
It seems a bit more common lately, and I don't know necessarily. I've got some wild theories on that, which I don't want to share today. But what I do want to share is word or phrase of the day. What might be on your mind today?
Simplicity. It was it's hard to make things simple. I'm just always inspired by simple things. And it's, there's the quote I've shared before by Mark Twain. I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time. And so simplicity, there's elegance in it, there's scalability in it. I'm just always inspired by simplicity.
Yeah, I think it was Einstein who said something similar, words to the effect, anyone can make it more complex, but mastery is when you can make it simple in a way that works. Cool. So for me, I don't know if it's a word or phrase. I saw the head of the Secret Service in Australia on the television talking about who they recruit and what are the attributes. And it was really interesting. He said that we need someone who's high IQ, someone who's high EQ, and someone who's humble. And it was really, really interesting. Just him describing why it's difficult, why they reject so many people who want to become Secret Service agents, and just the incredible levels that they go to with psychometric assessments and a whole range of things to ensure that they get those kind of people. So that was I guess a bit off the reservation compared to the normal word or phrase. But yeah, it's what are they looking for? Because it certainly translates into what we do.
It is. Well, exactly. We're looking for the same thing.
Yeah.
High EQ, high IQ, and humility. Because humility means they continually get smarter and they're generally not a jerk to work with. That's awesome. Cool. Well, let's dig into today. So today is, hey, I'm thinking about appointing my first COO, that is a chief operating officer or president or similar title. But basically, what do I do? And this is generally a scenario where the CEO has been running the business for quite a while. And many of our CEOs have run the business for a decade or 2 decades or 3 decades. And people get to the point where they got to be thinking about succession, or they just want someone else to run operationally so they can do other things. Some go to do more charity work, some want to do other businesses, some want to work less or start another division. Who knows? But the point of it is I want to get that president or COO in place so that I can be freed up for whatever it happens to be and having somebody else run the day-to-day of the operations. And I just wanted to find a term because everyone has their own terms, but often in the world, the CEO has the title of president and CEO. And in simple terms, no matter what you're doing, the CEO's role has the strategic part, which I would say is more CEO, and then the president part that's more operational. Now, I'm making this really simple. And really what we're saying in this episode is this is about people that want someone to take the operational part of the CEO's role from them. And so that they can be freed up to be more strategic and work on, forward and or other things.
Yeah.
And that could be a president, that could be a CEO. It could be called a lot of different things, but someone to strip away a lot of the CEO's operational responsibility.
And in Australia, it might also be called a general manager. And in other countries, there are other terms. But broadly, what you're saying is we're trying to say the day-to-day running of the operations, sales, operations, accounting, finance, whatever it is, we're getting those areas to report to this person, and then the CEO or the chair or whatever, however you delineate that, it's the first time that you make that split where you used to be running everything and now you're splitting your role so that someone else is going to run operations. It's a tough tough gig.
Yes, and tough sometimes getting the right person, and tough making the change inside the CEO's head, who's used to having his or her hands on all the levers and involved in everything. But generally, it is something that becomes more and more desirable by CEOs after they've been doing it for a long time, and at some point they're ready, and that's when we start talking about it. So that's what we're digging into today. And it's interesting. I go back 15 years, maybe more. But one of the entrepreneurs I worked with built a great company, and he got to the point he was kind of tired of it, and there were some issues with a business partner and a bunch of things. But his solution was to sell the business, which I never felt right. But he was going to sell it and move on and do other stuff. And he tried to get a president a couple of times. It didn't work. One, he hired him because he had a really fancy degree from a fancy school, but that didn't work. Another one had all the perfect industry experience. That didn't work. Finally, he ended up with a junior person on a team who had grown in the company over a decade, giving this guy a chance. He had to be in his late 30s at the time. It was a solid company. And this person in the end became the president, has been the president ever since. It's at least 15 years. And the guy, the CEO has been freed from 90-something% of the day-to-day for well over a decade. And it works very well. He just had to learn a bunch of things and figure out a bunch of things and obviously get the right person. But that's kind of what we're looking at. That's the move. You're not out of the business. You're not selling the business. You're just getting someone to run it. So the pressure can be on the weight of the shoulders of the younger person who's earlier in their career, and you can use your brains more than your brawn.
There's one of the most successful coaches that we know of is a guy called Marshall Goldsmith. He wrote a book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And that's a relevant phrase to what we're speaking about because if you founded the company, if you have handpicked all of the people around you, it's really, really hard to not stick to those same habits that saw you succeed, and to have someone else who's going to want to do things their way, perhaps. Overcoming that is a real and present challenge. And you might say, yeah, but I've had enough. I really just want to get out of this.
Yeah. Easy to say, hard to do.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. I had a CEO, same sort of situation, founder that I worked with, probably, $15 million business. And she wanted to appoint a general manager so that she could have a family. She needed to do all the family stuff, right? And she'd been running really hard for all of her career, and she could see, this is my time. She went and she appointed a general manager. After 2 months, one of the key metrics of the new general manager or COO was to report weekly finance numbers. After the first 2 months, she realized that this person hadn't logged into their accounting package once. So didn't have any idea whatsoever about the accounting side. And, I guess there's a thing that we say when it comes to hiring, which is hire slowly, right? Make sure that take the care, hire slow and fire fast is the old adage, right? But you've got to make sure that you've got the right person. And it's ever so important in this situation if you're hiring rather than promoting.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's a whole and so there's some things you need to be clear on what the role is and what's the delineation between the CEO's role and this role that you're hiring. You got to have the right person, and then you got to have the right tools and systems as well. There's a lot required on it. The main thing is like Colin's bullets and cannonballs. You want to do lots of tests. So I had a client in the US, and this was about at the time just over 100 million of revenue. Excellent business. And the CEO wanted a president. And so the head of sales was excellent. He was great. He was a machine. He was a beast. Like, he would not only had the high IQ and the high EQ and was humble. He was an ex-military guy. The guy was just awesome. If he said something would happen, it happened. there wasn't, and this is the person who became the president, right? So
yeah,
working with the CEO, and we just, with this guy, everything looked like it would be right with this guy, but we just started giving him more responsibility, one thing at a time. So, head of sales, then he had marketing and customer service. And then that was dialed in, and that took a while. And then next gave him operations. And the CEO held on to one really sensitive part of operations. And then he had all sales, marketing, and all operations. And then the CEO had finance. And this person thrived until they hit close to $1 billion. Like it just cranked it. The key is, sometimes the CEO still keeps finance as a direct report, and sometimes they don't, depending on the structure. The thing is that this CEO thought he had the right guy. They had a great partnership, and he just kept testing it to see, and it kept working and working. The effectiveness continued to scale, and so they continued to do it. And, there's other situations where that doesn't work. And I had another one where we did some tests, and we had 2 executives that we thought would be, and we were 5 years out. We wanted to start testing early.
Yeah.
And so we had some conversations with them. The CEO and I sat down with them. I was doing some coaching with them, and we gave them projects, just pure, hey, here's where you need to grow, and here are some projects that could get you there, and some education you could consider to help enhance your knowledge. And we did not know, we had no clue. They were both, like, in our mind, equal contenders who in 3 to 5 years could be close. Well, one person just scaled and scaled and scaled. The other person didn't move an inch.
Yeah.
And again, we couldn't have predicted it. Truly, if you were to be a betting person, you would have bet on the guy who didn't move an inch before it happened. Yeah. It was shocked me, actually. But the main thing is, let the real world experience real world projects and challenges and see how they do. And the second, the one who did thrive, he could take over the job now, and with some extra support.
I'm sorry, Kev, close that out.
No, it's good. It's good.
The thing is, there's an old saying, which is failing to plan is planning to fail. Okay. Yes. And it's so important. This is such an important role. And so understanding that, like, don't rush it. But there's been situations that I've experienced where there's been a sense of urgency to close a candidate because they think that the candidate has multiple offers on the table. The candidate wants to make the right pick, absolutely, and so do you. Yes, so don't rush it if it's a candidate situation, even if it's not. Coming back to failing to plan, there's a GM that was appointed, probably $25-30 million business that we work with. GM was appointed externally, went through a very rigorous detail, and the CEO was a very headstrong person, which is its pros and cons. I'm not debating that either way, but and so we made it really, really clear to both the candidate, the nominated candidate, and the CEO, this is what failure looks like. Like, there's a higher chance that we'll fail than succeed. One of the biggest things is having a super clear line in the sand, which is, this is what you own and that is what you own. Right. Don't cross. Be very, very clear about that, so that you know when you're not stepping on each other's toes, so that this person can have autonomy in their role. Sure, there's onboarding, and I wrote a book about onboarding called Onboarded. But beyond that, you want to be really, really clear and give the person ownership and autonomy.
Yes. Yeah, it's key. So there's some principles like the Brad's alluding to in terms of how do we generally approach it pretty similarly, and it's better to start sooner so you're not in a panic like that. And ideally, you've got internal people who can grow into the roles. That's the ideal scenario when it's possible. That, like I said, it's theoretically ideal. I love bringing in some rock stars from the outside. If you can bring in real good rock stars, because they can bring stuff your organization doesn't have. They bring new capabilities. But generally, we want to start at least 3 to 5 years out. And we start by drawing the org chart that we want. You're probably going from 4, 5, 6, 7 direct reports generally down to 3. Ideally, we go, say 6 direct reports, ideally get it gradually down to 3. And even that can be 2 steps, right? You might cluster the sales and marketing and customer, and then you might cluster all the operations, one at a time as you dial it in.
Yeah.
And then eventually you might go down to 1 or 2, but start 3 years out and with empty boxes, just what the jobs are, not people's names. Names will distort your thinking. And then think about knowing what would work. Every CEO likes it different. And, as I said, keep in mind, there could be 2, 3, 4 moves to get there. Once you know, then you can look at the existing team and consider if they can be developed into the roles. And assume that there can be a graceful transition if they can't. And there is a plan, but you got to have a lot of faith. And if there is a possibility, then and you ideally, and we have one organization, it's about 1,000 employees, and we're doing this with them, and we are assessing all of the key executives, and we're doing a full top grading interview and a full 360 assessment, and then coming up with a full development plan, whether they get the job or whether they continue to grow in the organization for the future. But we're doing an incredibly thorough process on evaluating for, I think there's 3 executive roles plus the CEO's replacement as well. Again, and we started this 5 years ago. It's insanely thorough, and we're doing it from the outside to get rid of the organizational bias. They know enough to know that if they do it themselves, that's going to be harder. So that's just the base of it. And of course, then you recruit if you need to, and then onboarding, all that other stuff. But even just getting to the point, you got to engineer this and reverse engineer it with a lot of time. And again, none of it's rocket science. It's just trying to make it highly effective with the least amount of risk you can based on how much time you have.
Yeah, take your time. There's based on how much time you have. Take your time, right? There's one CEO I worked with. He had a second in command appointed, and there was a 5-year transition before this person fully stepped out into an executive chair role where they only come to monthly meetings. But it took a long time, and it was a very gradual thing. That might not be right for you in your circumstance, but you want to reduce the risk. And I guess the part of the thing that we didn't cover in those principles is pride. If you're looking at it, you want to make sure that your team will be proud to report to this new COO, president, GM, whoever it is, because they're potentially proud to report to you. But that absence of pride can create a real issue unless that's there for however it comes from.
Yes, and you need to look at the pride a year into the person being in the role. Initially, it could be an absolute mess. So, as we're talking here, I'm thinking about a couple things that popped to mind on this too, Brad, is that, Warren Buffett doesn't have a lot of hands-on management in the companies that he owns. But one of the things that he requires from each of his CEOs annually is for them to tell him who the successor is if something happens to the CEO.
Yeah.
Basically, every year to know who that person would be, even if it's a short-term fill. And when we do talent reviews with organizations, one of the columns is next role, like what's the role we're grooming every person for, the key people, and successor. Who is that successor in the backfill? So even if you don't plan up to give up your CEO role for a long time, you should be knowing your successor anyways and always thinking about it.
And that's the perfect theoretical approach. Every role has a successor. I spoke about that in my book, Made to Thrive.
Sure.
Every role has a successor. It mitigates risk. If you can do that, then that's awesome. Sometimes you can't, but that could be the simple thing. Think out 1, 2, 3 years. Let's appoint a successor, and who is it for you? And how do you validate that they are the right person to step into you? Because sometimes it can be better or more effective if you appoint from within. Not always, but sometimes.
If you can, it's ideal. Again, that's theoretically ideal. I like that, Brad. It's theoretically ideal to be able to do that. And It can be great for the outside. And if you are looking the outside, that's why you have to spend a lot of time networking and meeting people looking for it. One of my clients just found an amazing person to step into this role. It was interesting. I had a conversation with one of his key executives who just joined, fresh person in, and I've been wanting to push a president into this company. I know it'll be good for the CEO. I know it'd be a few years out. Long story short, we had a conversation. He said, well, this guy just came available. Let's talk to him. And he's 5 times ahead, like 5 times the size of business that we have, or my client has. And so a conversation led to a meeting, led to this. Now the guy has a potential. He might be coming in as the president from a conversation, because we were looking 3 to 5 years out. We were asking people about who they knew. And even, for example, this CEO, he wanted to meet someone who was the president of a company that was a few $1 billion in the same industry. He wanted to meet them, to see them, to understand the role. And interestingly, he might actually be hiring him. So anyway.
Yeah, I don't love that. I don't love that. I don't
what
know.
What don't you love about that?
Well, I don't know if the first thing that you should do is to go and talk to people in the market, because then you can get candidate lust, right? I think the first thing you should do is to build a job scorecard or a role scorecard. The first thing you should do is to...
I love it when we disagree.
Well, let's go back to the title. I'm thinking about appointing my first COO or president. What should I do? I think you should think about what you want to do, and that means building a scorecard for yourself.
Sure.
And
that's
then
theoretically perfect.
Yep. And then you should build a scorecard for a general manager, COO, president. Like, what are you going to do and what are they going to do? Because unless you know that, how are you going to know that the candidate that you've fallen in love with is going to be anywhere near what you need?
It's funny. We're at the end. We're getting close to the end. I would, but when an ideal person comes along, when a rock star person in the role that you want, he didn't have the scorecard done. We know what the role is. We know what the accountabilities are, but the work isn't done. But an ideal candidate comes along. First thing I want to do is meet them and start to explore it.
How do you know they're ideal?
What's that? Because they did the exact job in another organization that was 5 times the size.
Well,
from an initial, but now before you hire them, yes, but at this point, when there's a hot prospect, that's the entrepreneurial part of me. When there's a great opportunity, we're going to go and see what we can do with it. We're still going to do an evaluation and do it right if we're going to take it somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But we're still going to get to the same place. My creative entrepreneurial side, sometimes if we have to approach it backwards, I think it's okay.
Cool. Well, every person's situation is different. Seek your own advice.
Exactly. But we want to get to the point where we agree. We want to have that clarity. Absolutely. Yeah. And know specifically what we're expecting. Yeah. And I try to follow it follow the process, 90%. Sometimes you got to be a little entrepreneurial, but it is dangerous.
Very good.
We're still doing it versus a scorecard, just backwards. All right. Well, this has been the Growth Whisperers. Thanks for listening. As always, lots of ideas. As Brad said, seek your own advice. We're giving you ideas and thoughts to help you thrive in these key parts of your job and your company and the difference you're trying to make. This has been Kevin Lawrence here in Vancouver and Brad Giles down there in Perth. If you haven't yet subscribed, just subscribe and rate the show. Hopefully you think it's awesome and give it a 5. And if you have ideas that would make it better, please let us know. For the YouTube version, just go to YouTube, search The Growth Whisperers. And to reach Brad or Kevin, we both have weekly newsletters. We both have firms that help organizations to thrive and build enduring great companies. You can get a hold of Brad and his team at evolutionpartners.com.au, and Kevin is at lawrenceandco.com. Hope you have an awesome week and hope you find that amazing talent you need to keep growing.